we introduce two new characters, Fox and Sharon. Where is the link with the previous scene, you'll ask? Well, Joe had a one-night stand with Fox a few years ago. And we'll get back to that encounter in episode 4.
Julian Maniguera was presenting Full Circle, and the programme was produced by Kate Bissell.
On BBC Radio 4.
If you think about the macroeconomic textbooks, they stopped at chapter 25 and this was chapter 35.
Crisis has again trumped ideology, forcing high levels of spending and economic support.
It is easier to relax monetary policy than to tighten it.
The BBC's global trade correspondent Darshini David asks, where is the money coming from?
Do you think central bankers today have learnt from your experience, or do you think they are just on track to make the same kind of errors along the way?
Explore the roots, branches and shadows of the magic money forest on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds this Monday night at 8.
BBC News at 6 o'clock on Saturday the 12th of December. This is Chris Aldridge. Good morning. Boris Johnson has chaired a meeting to review the UK's contingency plans in the event that no deal can be reached in post-Brexit trade talks, which are likely to end tomorrow. The Ministry of Defence has also confirmed that 4 Royal Navy vessels are on standby to protect British fishing waters if no agreement is put in place. Here's our political correspondent, Jonathan Blake.
While the government has been preparing for trade talks to end without a deal for months, yesterday's meeting in the Cabinet Room at number 10 was a timely update for the Prime Minister after both sides said that was the most likely outcome of negotiations. He chaired what was described as a stocktake on the UK's preparedness for a no-deal scenario with the Cabinet Office Minister Michael Gove and senior officials. 4 Royal Navy patrol boats will be ready to protect UK fishing waters, it's been confirmed, as part of what the Ministry of Defence said was extensive preparation for a range of scenarios at the end of the transition period.
The US Supreme Court has dealt a crushing blow to Donald Trump's legal challenges to the outcome of the presidential election. The justices rejected calls to overturn results in 4 states won by President-elect Joe Biden. Nomia Iqbal reports from Washington.
This lawsuit was filed by Texas, a Republican stronghold, challenging the voting results in 4 other states won by Joe Biden: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania and Georgia. The U.S. Constitution gives the Supreme Court what's known as original jurisdiction to hear interstate disputes. The challenge was backed by Mr. Trump as well as more than 100 Republicans in Congress. The suit claims that changes made by the 4 states to voting procedures to expand postal voting were unlawful. In a brief, unsigned order, the Supreme Court ruled that Texas lacks the legal standing to pursue the case.
The drugs regulator in the US, the FDA, has given its approval to the Pfizer-BioNTech coronavirus vaccine. The agency had come under intense pressure from the Trump administration to give it the green light. The jab is already being given to people in the UK. President Trump said the first inoculations would take place within 24 hours. He released a video welcoming the FDA's decision.
Today our nation has achieved a medical miracle. We have delivered a safe and effective vaccine in just 9 months. This is one of the greatest scientific accomplishments in history. It will save millions of lives and soon end the pandemic once and for all.
The government is to end financial support for overseas projects involving oil, gas and coal as part of efforts to tackle climate change. The funding was worth £21 billion over the last 4 years, and the new policy is in line with the UK's move away from fossil fuels at home. The announcement comes as Britain co-hosts an international online summit today to step up action on cutting greenhouse gases. The government is being urged to provide more financial help to taxi drivers. The trade body has warned that without assistance, many won't survive the next 12 months. Taxi drivers, who are mostly self-employed, have suffered a drop of as much as 90% in their income during the pandemic. The National Trust says a colony of one of the UK's rarest seabirds has had its most successful breeding season for more than 25 years. Little terns have been in serious decline nationally since the 1980s, with fewer than 2,000 pairs left. but rangers in North Norfolk have seen a significant increase in nesting terns and believe it's partly down to the first national lockdown, which resulted in less disturbance. Chris Bealby is the National Trust Countryside Manager.
It's meant a lot to us on the Norfolk coast to have such a fantastic conservation success during a really difficult year. Like everybody else, we faced some major challenges and difficulties coping with the pandemic, but to have these fantastic, charismatic birds breeding so successfully has been a real boon.
Chris Bealby. That's the BBC News. Now for a look at the weekend weather, here's Stav Danaos.
Thanks very much, Chris. Good morning to you. This weekend's a bit of a tale of two halves. Today, I think, looking like being the driest one, certainly across western areas, though there'll be a few showers around. Tomorrow, though, looks like a low pressure will come in, quite a deep low, and that's going to bring a spell of wet and windy weather to all areas, but it will be turning milder. Today, though, for England, Wales and Scotland, we're starting cloudy and rather damp, with outbreaks of light rain and drizzle, continuing to push eastward, a little bit of mist and fog around too. It's going to be quite a slow process, but sunny spells will develop across Northern Ireland this morning, and into Wales, the Midlands, Western and Southern England, along with southwest Scotland into the afternoon. So it's a slow improvement to the weather picture today, with that dry and brighter weather slowly spreading in from the west. It's going to stay cloudy across eastern parts of the country throughout the day, as that rain will be pretty reluctant to move away. And temperatures today range from 8 to 11 degrees. Tomorrow starts dry across northern and eastern areas with some sunshine, but very soon the wet and windy weather will be spreading to all areas with gales around southern and western coast, but it's going to be very mild with highs of 11 to 13 Celsius.
Stav Danaos. Now I'll look at the papers, and the Daily Telegraph says Boris Johnson has suffered a triple snub as France and Germany rebuffed his efforts to arrange personal meetings to forge a Brexit trade deal. The Sun says the two sides in the talks are still at loggerheads, while the Daily Mail urges them to stop grandstanding. The Financial Times reports that Brussels has told member states not to consider cutting side deals with Britain if the trade talks fail. It says the EU doesn't want anything to ease the consequences of no deal. The Daily Express splashes with the news that gunships are to guard British fish if there's no agreement. Sources stress that Navy ships won't be using the machine guns they carry, but will be able to inspect and impound EU fishing boats if they stray into UK waters. The Times says legislation is being rushed through to give sailors new powers amid concerns about violent clashes. Scientists tell The Guardian that people should rethink any plans to get together over Christmas because of fears about rising coronavirus case numbers. The paper says there are signs infections are increasing again after falling in November, and that hospitalizations are on the rise in some parts of the country. One professor argues that if people really want to keep their loved ones safe, the best thing is not to see them. The Daily Telegraph says schools in England could be sued by ministers if they close early for Christmas to reduce the spread of coronavirus among students. It says one school has already reversed the plan to switch to online learning after it was threatened with legal action. It says an academy trust in London still plans to stop early. The Telegraph says many head teachers will turn a blind eye if parents keep their children off school, and that fines won't be imposed. Friends of Dame Barbara Windsor tell The Sun they want her death to mark a turning point in the fight against dementia. It says it can be her legacy. The Daily Mirror says her widower has urged the government to be true to its promises to invest more in care. That's our look at the papers. We'll have more in the Today programme from 7 o'clock. Now, though, on BBC Radio 4, we join the singer-songwriter Kitty McFarlane to hear how the Somerset Levels has inspired some of her music in Open Country.
We stop and let the sky take hold of our breath as the last of evening light flees to the west. The stars, they soon will start to pace overhead like the rush in a seashell, or a hum in the maze, or the mutter of pages turned in haste. So I'm here on the Avalon Marshes, on the Somerset Levels and Moors at RSPB Ham Wall, standing in front of a beautiful scrape filled with bird life this morning. I can see tufted ducks and geese and teal and a ringed plover, and we just saw a heron fly over too. And I'm not sure why, but I'm always drawn to wetlands. Everything here seems to merge. The sky blends into the still mirror-like water, and the golden reed beds that surround the scrape murmur and sigh in the wind. I saw my first bittern here, flying low, back hunched, skimming across the reeds. It's a kind of shorter, stumpier looking member of the heron family, which has colours that completely blend into the backdrop, and there's something ancient and proud about them and their stature, and the fact that they've just recently begun to return from the brink of extinction that is so breathtaking. The males make this wonderful booming sound in the spring, a bit like when you blow over the top of a glass bottle, an unearthly call that can travel for miles across this kind of landscape. And it's places like this where you're no longer in the 21st century, you're launched into the past, and you can take a moment to breathe and imagine how it once was, maybe 6,000 years ago, when Neolithic people were roaming across their wooden walkways and the bitterns were booming in their thousands. But in reality, this natural landscape has been carved out by mankind over the last few thousand years, altered and managed again and again. And on the map, you can see the geometric shapes of where the peat bogs have been dug out for the horticulture industry in the 60s, where the ditches and rinds have been straightened and managed, and the area has been worked as farmland. And this nature reserve itself was created in the 90s in an old, scarred peat fields. It seems like the perfect example of how we humans can and do exploit the land, but also how we can do amazing things with it too. And it is just really beautiful. In the morning, if you get down here and look towards the sun, you can see the gossamer threads being stretched between the grasses and the reflections in the water of the sky and the clouds and the reeds. And the soundscape, this kind of cinematic soundscape of raucous activity with Glastonbury Tor poking out in the background. The banks of the river brew lie folded in pleats, like the lines that the morning left pressed into your cheek. And the sun, a fading creature, shivers with your heartbeat. They fly over the stories held in the peat, telling their own in a million wing beats, like the rush in a seashell, or a hum in the maze, or the mutter of pages turned in haste. Such a nice place to sing. So I've come to the bottom of Burrow Mump, which is a kind of sticky-outy hill that pokes out like an island on the Somerset Levels. And I've come here to talk to Gavin Pretor-Pinney. Hello.
Hi there.
Who is the founder of the Cloud Appreciation Society. And I can't really imagine anything better than coming here and talking about clouds with you.
You get a good view of the clouds from here.
There's a drone above us making a kind of hissing noise, so hopefully that's not going to be too frustrating. But yeah, we're going to climb up this hill and have a look from the top. But I first came about the Cloud Appreciation Society when one of your members directed me towards you after I released my debut album a couple of years ago, which is called Namer of Clouds. And I wrote the title track of that about a man called Luke Howard, who was the person who came up with all of the names that we use now for the cloud formations. And I wonder what you think it is about turning our faces towards the skies that seems to have always held this kind of power and mystery over us as humans.
Well, I mean, the sky is the most ungovernable and uncontrollable part of nature. So there's that initial appeal, which is it's something beyond our kind of influence, but also it's something that's omnipresent, the sky. It's always within our field of vision. That can actually mean we pay less attention to it than other parts of nature, because something that's always there, you can become a bit blind to. But Luke Howard, who you wrote that song about and named your album after, he forged a vocabulary for this beautiful chaos we have above us the whole time. He proposed the somewhat radical idea at the time, 1802, of, maybe we could name them in the same way we name plants and animals with Latin names. Maybe we could do the same with these, at first glance, seemingly random shapes in the sky.
I think you're completely right, and I think that's a really beautiful way of putting it, sort of defining the chaos above us. And some of the words are really beautiful, aren't they? The way the Latin words describe, is it cirrus? What is that sort of wispy cloud?
Cirrus are the high ice crystal clouds that descend in these beautiful brush-stroked streaks. But actually the Latin comes from the Latin for a lock of hair. So these are sort of likened to the appearance of flowing locks in the wind. They all have these Latin names, a little bit off-putting at first, but often those Latin names are just describing what the cloud looks like. It's just the age-old pleasure of finding shapes in the sky and in the clouds, and you say it in Latin because it sounds more grown up.
So true. Shall we head up the hill and see if we can actually get closer to the sky ourselves?
Yeah, definitely. Let's go for it.
I think last time I came up here, I took a tumble. It's
really?
not too muddy this time, but it can get very, very slippy up here.
Yeah.
There was a time when all that was known of our skies was danger undefined.
We've climbed up the very steep slopes of the side of Burrow Mump on the Somerset levels, and we are now standing at the top and looking around us in all directions. You can see for miles all the way around. You've got the Polden Hills towards the southwest and the Mendip Hills towards the north, and Glastonbury Tor in the distance actually poking above the horizon. And on the top of this mump is an old church which is sort of standing proudly in ruins against a cloudy sky. I think most people have probably got quite a negative attitude towards clouds and always think that they bring rain.
Yeah.
What I think you've kind of done with your society is kind of reinvent clouds a little bit and remind people that there's beauty there as well.
No, I mean, only a relatively small proportion of the different types of clouds actually produce rain, firstly. And it all depends where you are in the world, of course. There are some cultures where the climate means that they have a very different relationship with clouds. There's an Arabic phrase used in Iran and Iraq, which is somebody who's lucky or blessed. They say their sky is always filled with clouds. It's the opposite to ours.
Wow.
Because that's seen as a good thing in the kind of scorching heat.
Yes.
To get some shade, maybe the chance of some rain. But, like somewhere like the British Isles where you have no shortage of rain, then clouds can feel like, you've got too many of them. And so we have written into our language someone being under a cloud when they're down, a cloud on the horizon being trouble in store. And so, partly it's relative, but I think in any situation you can look at the everyday stuff around you and you can either go, oh yeah, there's more of that, or you can invite yourself to look at it afresh.
So we are surrounded by clouds today. I'm quite glad actually that it's not just a blue sky, because there's something to look at.
Yeah.
So I wondered if we could look out and have a look at what kind of clouds we've got around us.
Sure.
Have we got just one type, or are there lots of things going on?
Firstly, the point to make is these are fairly low clouds we have today, and there are three types of low clouds, two of which we've got here. One's called stratocumulus and one's called cumulus.
So what I always remember when I was growing up, we had a phrase, mackerel sky, never wet, never dry. Mackerel sky, because I think that's a really beautiful cloud formation where they're kind of fish scale-like ripple effect.
Those would be generally higher clouds than these, so they would be either altocumulus or even cirrocumulus, both of which are higher clumpy clouds. And if they were in mackerel like streaks, like on the skin of a mackerel. You would call it undulatus. So maybe the classic would be cirrocumulus undulatus, or otherwise altocumulus undulatus. That is a formation that can be associated with the arrival of a weather front. And so not long wet, not long dry means it kind of arrives and you get some showers and then it's sort of over with. Do you see what I mean? The whole thing is kind of quite a fast changing weather system coming over.
Thank you so much.
Really
Brilliant. I want to write another song about it now.
And under a cloud of yellow fog, in Hinckley's dark shadow beyond the mud, as Cardiff flights in the sky above, sometimes cool-made this, my love.
Just look out, Kitty, just look at that's a flock of golden plover there, swirling around. They're all dark coloured and they're flying around, trying to find somewhere to settle as the water's rushing in. Just to our right, as you were speaking, a kestrel was just hovering in this scrubland just below us here that leads then into the marshes that leads on to the water. And as I was waiting for you to arrive, there were curlew flying across this landscape, just a line of them flying, occasionally calling, and with a lapwing just going up and down. It's just beautiful to watch the dynamic, and you see the shapes of the golden plover there.
There is an amazing flock of these birds that you can see in the distance, just lifting up and then lifting back down again, like the wind or like a wave.
And the colours we can see are gunmetal grey, blues, the russet-coloured, browny colours of the marsh and the reeds right in front of us. And we're just standing on the edge of green fields, which are looking quite wintry now, aren't they? So it's a low-lying, muted landscape, full of life, but you have to stand here and wait for the life to reveal itself to you.
It's one of those places that I feel is wild and surrounded by nature, but also in the heart of a human planet. And looking around here, we're standing on the kind of spindly peninsula called Steart Marshes, and I'm with Mary Colwell, who, forgive me for calling you the curlew lady, but that's who you are in my head. But you've also got plenty of other expertise as well, and broadcaster, nature writer, all sorts. And I'm really happy to be here with you because we're standing in front of such an amazing view. To the left, there's Hinkley Point with all the cranes and the kind of square man-made blocks of concrete, and all the way to the right, lit up at the moment, is Burnham-on-Sea with its tiny little white wooden lighthouse that's just catching the light on the sand on the other side of the Parrot, which opens up into the estuary to the right. And it's kind of at the halfway along the Bristol Channel. And the birds that we do see here, because there seems to be so many already and we've only just got here, are not necessarily birds that live here all year round, are they?
They're not, and many of these birds, particularly the waders, will be coming to Bridgewater Bay, a place like this, with all their rich mudflats, all these soft sediments everywhere around. This is a good place to spend the winter. We have mild winters here, although we may not think they are very often. They really are for the birds. So the birds are coming from Europe, over from Ireland, and they're coming here to sort of spend the harsh months sitting out, making the most of these very rich estuaries that we have right around our coast. This is just one.
So if we get onto the top of curlews, because I know that curlews are something that have attracted you for a few years, and a kind of bird that you've taken up as a bit of a champion, I suppose, because of their declining numbers in our country. When you say that there are curlews around here, those are not our curlews, are they?
To be honest, nobody actually knows because no one's really looked, but they are most likely to be birds from Europe. We do know from other areas that we get a huge influx of birds from Scandinavia, from Poland, from France, from Germany, all coming here to spend the winter. So the likelihood is that they're not, because the British curlew numbers are falling quite dramatically. And in fact, even the wintering numbers are going down. You would normally, routinely, over the last few years, have expected there to be 1,000 overwintering curlew here. In the last 2 or 3 years, 4 years, it's been going down and down. It's about 600 now. So we are seeing, even in the wintering flocks, a decline in numbers.
And what is it about curlews that you like so much?
Oh, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't love them? They are just so beautiful. They're sort of sculptural, with their long, downward curving bills and their smooth, beautiful outlines. They're quite big, so you can actually see them, and you know what they are. But it's when they open their beak, isn't it? That fabulous fluting, trilling call that they make, and mainly in the breeding season, that sort of bubbling sound. But also they make a whole range of other sounds, like curlee sound, which just sort of fires out across this wonderful muddy landscape.
Your book is called Curlew Moon, and I wonder what the link to the moon is. Is it something to do with their beak?
It is, because the Latin name for the Eurasian curlew is Numenius arquata. Numenius, it means new moon, and arquata means shaped like an archer's bow. And so both of them refer to the shape of the curlew's bill, that long, curved, beautiful sculptural shape. So curlew moon just seemed like a nice way to talk to them. And whenever you see a new moon, whenever I look up and see a new moon, I always think of curlews.
See, right now, you see, the eels in this sort of water will be, if temperature's dropping below, I don't know what the water temperature is now, but it might be 9, 8, 7, but eels hibernate once it drops below that. They back up into the banks and go to sleep.
What, anchor themselves in?
And, yeah, literally back in. They reverse in, and they just spend the winter like that in hibernated state. So the temperature drop really triggers the.
That's amazing.
The story.
So will they be doing that yet at this point?
It'll
be cold enough and they'll be in there.
I mean, downriver here, when you get lots and lots of eels, they tend to be males. So they'll be here only for, say, 10 years.
Yeah.
Whereas the ladies tend to go upstream more, where there are fewer eels.
Oh, really?
And then they spend more like 15 years in our temperatures to grow up.
I came across a weird fact that I thought they weren't really gendered until they swam back. Is that
No, they're not
true?
gendered until they choose their sex. And in our country, it's about year 4 or 5.
So we've come to a different part of Steart Marshes, and we're standing now in front of a brackish pool with bulrushes and reeds at the bottom of a giant pylon that's stretching out into the horizon, and we've just seen a big flock of lapwings and golden plover fly overhead. And I'm standing here with the wonderful Andrew Carr, who is the chairman of the Sustainable Eel Group. The thing that drew me to eels in the first place, when I feel like I had a moment of discovery when I learned about eels, was the epic journey that they have, and they travel across the world in huge numbers and at huge distances. Could you sort of describe their life cycle for us?
It's both a natural journey and an unnatural journey, but yes, they circumnavigate the globe. So they start off in the Sargasso Sea, that's at the bottom of the Bermuda Triangle, about 4,000 miles away, and they literally float on the Atlantic currents, moving slowly towards Europe. It takes a couple of years. Then they enter the rivers, into the freshwater rivers of Europe, west-flowing ones. Sometimes we help them to locations because 3/4 of them arrive in the Bay of Biscay. That's 3/4 of 1.3 billion, which is the annual arrival at the moment. 50 years ago, it had been 10 times that number.
Wow.
And then, of course, they're trying to grow up in our waters, heading back downstream again, and then they're trying to swim all the way back via the Azores. We've been satellite tagging them, but we haven't tagged them beyond the Azores yet. I did say circumnavigate the world, and I'll just carry on with that idea, because many of them are illegally caught and then put in suitcases on aeroplanes to go to Asia, where they're grown on in farms, and then they're sold to the Chinese and the Japanese. But they also get flown on again across the Pacific and then sold into the sushi markets of North America. So they do, in effect, some circumnavigate the entire world.
Inadvertently, wow. And one of the things that I've heard that is a problem for eels, as they make this journey not just from the Sargasso Sea and across the Atlantic, but then transitioning from the saltwater to the freshwater and heading upstream, they're coming across obstacles.
Oh, yeah. Are they? There's something like 1.3 million barriers to fish migration in the rivers of Europe. And then there are 25,000 hydropower stations with their turbines, and turbines and eels don't mix. We've lost so much habitat. Here we are in a wetland, a restored wetland. We've lost, each country has a different figure, but 70 to 80% of the wetlands have been drained. And wetlands are like the supercritical habitat for eel, because they arrive and they have to metamorphosize from a saltwater to a freshwater fish. And they do that in their nursery habitats, which are wetlands. We didn't intend to make life difficult for the eels. We just engineered water for our needs, and we didn't think about nature. Now, having to put it right is so much more expensive than designing the solution in the beginning.
I did a day of conservation work down on the River Axe, actually, in North Somerset, and it was with an organisation called BART, Bristol Avon Rivers Trust, and we went down one night in February and we were testing out methodology for catching them with nets in order to monitor them and then potentially put them on the other side of obstacles and see what the numbers were like. And I just remember getting these trays of these tiny glass eels, which had just arrived, see-through at that stage, and they looked like rice noodles, looked like kind of vermicelli, and you could see them wriggling around in your hand, and I just thought that this little scrap of life has come so far.
The glass eel chasing estuaries, to ford and fen, to mud and mire, and as the leaves are doomed to bruise, and the fruit is bound for falling, we are all compelled to move our busy skies and racing ocean.
For me, I think the eel has kind of become this symbol of the planet, and I wrote a song about it called Glass Eel, which is loosely about this fantastic cycle that the eel goes through, but also about our place in the world. And I think there's so many parallels between the plight of the eel and our own plight, where there are more and more borders and boundaries and obstacles to cross, and that little eel that is travelling all that distance and has done for, as you say, 100 million years, that is just something that is completely beyond my comprehension. But I also find it quite reassuring, the idea that I am part of a sort of centrifuge of life, the same centrifuge that drives the eel as well.
Yes.
Here we are in our vice and our vanity, mindless of the irony, and while patient science adds fact to fact, hasty man draws lines on maps